for any composer, to write a passion is an undertaking that goes way beyond writing a symphony or a quartet or even any other piece with text, because it's a story that resonates very deeply today with a great part of the world. I mean, it's a story by which people live their lives. In the case of the Passion that I wrote, the Saint Mark Passion, and when I was working on it, I had basically 2 years of absolute fear, and I was frozen because in my particular situation, being Jewish, I had to open myself to believe in the possibility that this was the reality, that this was that Jesus was God, that he had resurrected, and so forth, which is a huge challenge in midlife to open yourself to a whole new possibility. So on one hand, you have the passion being central to the existence of people for the last 2,000 years, and on the other hand, you have this text of the passion having been used in many times during history as an instrument of oppression towards Jews and other non-Christian people. So I think it is a huge undertaking for any composer. In my particular case, perhaps had another set of challenges. When you look at Bach, that not only is a musical giant, but also understood the text from within the tradition. Or James Macmillan, also he is writing from within. Therefore, of course, they must have their own fears, but are different than the fears of writing from without. So I think that part of my hesitation, of my being frozen, so to speak, for a period was that knowledge of being immersed in a text that was sacred to my neighbors, and for me it was a new experience. And the question was, what right do I have to do this? You know, and the solution, what prompted me to actually go and do it was remembering a painting that my great-grandmother had in her kitchen. I mean, obviously it was a reproduction. It was Jeremiah Lamenting the Fall of Jerusalem by Rembrandt. And it's a painting that struck me always as a child as penetrating the Jewish soul in a deeper way than any Jewish painting that I know even today, you know, deeper than Chagall or other Jewish painters. I felt that Rembrandt was able to discover the innermost truth of the Jewish soul in that painting. And then I reflected, you know, look, Rembrandt was not Jewish, but he lived among the Jews. And by no means I have the talent of Rembrandt, but I had the same experience. I grew up in the midst of Catholic friends, and I mean, all my friends were Catholics, all my neighbors were Catholics, and I was different. But I could see, I said, you know, maybe I could see things in this family, so to speak, that they themselves don't see. It's like when you know, when you go to a friend's family and you see some dynamics, some some relationships that the people that live there don't see, because you have a perspective. So I said, well, if my passion will have 5 minutes of the truth that Rembrandt has about the Jews, then I will be okay. You know, that was what gave me the courage. But it's the reality of life today, that most composers that write religious music write it for the concert hall, like Stravinsky wrote the Symphony of Psalms and so forth. I think that both in the case of, I mean, I think that any composer, regardless of the fact that we are writing for the concert hall and not for the church as a performance space, you only write a piece like this if it's a matter of life or death. You know, you don't say yes to, or you don't undertake a passion unless it's something that you are willing to give your life for. I mean, for a number of years at least, to understand what does it mean. Why is this story so central to the history of people on this planet? The quote-unquote mission of writing the St. Mark Passion was to write a passion as it's lived in Latin America, which is a very different Jesus that we see than the Jesus, the European Jesus that you're used to. In Latin America, not only Jesus is different, and in my case, I decided Jesus would be the people. Why? Because it's the people of Latin America, the carriers of the suffering, the ones that endure and that preserve the faith, that overcome fear. In other words, there is not a single person that is Jesus. That's why in my passion, the lines of Jesus are said by different groups or soloists throughout the evening. There is not, like in Bach, one Jesus figure and one evangelist. In Latin America, the history of Christianism is not simple. It's very complex. For me, one of the most important events that I witnessed was when the dictatorship took power in Argentina in '76. There was a televised mass in which the Archbishop of Buenos Aires blessed the weapons of the dictators. And those same weapons were used to kidnap and kill low-ranking priests that worked at the slums with the poor. So there has always been a huge dichotomy between the hierarchy and the rank and file, in the church. So it was important for me to, when I went to to use the translations into Spanish of the text, to use the most popular translations. I used, for instance, it's very common that you go on a bus or on a subway and some handicapped vendor just puts the St. Mark Gospel on your lap and you give him 1 peso. So I used those translations. I didn't use the academic, the scholastic translations. I wanted this passion to be from below, so to speak, from the, as they say here, from the grassroots. And even more, when I worked on the language, I tweaked it a little bit, simply in choosing words that would have accents in the last syllables, a little bit like African, because a lot came from Africa. I rhythmicized the language as much as possible. I wanted this passion to be driven by rhythm. I think that the passion as a genre will live as long as people ask themselves, what is the meaning of life? What happens after death? Do I fear death? How do I overcome my fear of death? What do I do in the face of betrayal, of injustice? I mean, what am I living for? So those questions, I think, we'll always be asking ourselves. And this story is, for believers and non-believers, it is really, as they say, the greatest story ever told. And I think it offers composers the possibility of tackling these fundamental questions of human existence, and also saying, this is how we feel about these central questions today, but also to talk back to Bach, to Schutz, to Jesus, and talk to the future. I mean, in every generation, we have to ask ourselves these questions and answer them with the experience of our era.